We'll talk about the team structure, technology stack, talent and skills, as well as some examples and use cases of how organizations have driven data-centric experimentation for driving marketing outcomes.
We have now multi-stakeholders getting involved when marketers are designing for outcomes. Therefore, the hypotheses have to tie together, and then you have to design for those experiments. So what sort of technologies are playing an important role in that part?
The pace of technological change is extreme, right? At least in the today's world, at least what we see in today's world, right? And businesses have to constantly, post-pandemic with the digital transformation push, businesses have to constantly reinvent themselves.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the second episode of the podcast on data-centric experimentation for marketing. In the first episode, we had an insightful discussion on the meaning of data-centric experimentation and why is it important, how organizations are positioned to adopt it, and what are the challenges and major shifts in this space, including a conversation about Gen AI experimentation in marketing. In today's episode, we'll talk about the implementation aspects of data-centric experimentation. We'll talk about the team structure, the technology stack, talent and skills, as well as some examples and use cases of how organizations have driven data-centric experimentation for driving marketing outcomes. Welcome back, Vishal and Ani.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashish.
Okay, so let's dive in today's discussion. Ani, we talked about a lot of aspects around data-centric experimentation, but I think from an implementation standpoint, the tech stack becomes very important as you try and implement and scale this within the organization. So, what tech stack is required to effectively conduct data-centric experimentation?
Yeah, a very interesting question. When I look at the challenges and the risk and rewards of data-centric experimentation, or at least the way we are reimagining it, there are three concrete parts to the tech stack. One is obviously what is the right technology and the right way of using it to do the first part, which is we have now multi-stakeholders getting involved when marketers are designing for outcomes. Therefore, the hypotheses have to tie together, and then you have to design for those experiments. So what sort of technologies are playing an important role in that part? Second is then, to do that, making sure you have access to all the right data, because there is lots of signals and noise. There are a lot of trends happening around that. So how do I make sure that I have the right data and I execute it in a scaled, high frequency and agile manner? And the last is, how do I bring all these things together in a very virtuous cycle, right? And a constant feedback loop. So what we are seeing I'll limit it to 3 or 4 trends or technology aspects. One is Gen AI, as we touched upon in the last call also, because of its natural ability to bridge between the engineering and creative aspects, it is playing a big role in the hypothesis selection and design of experiments. There are some challenges in that also. Both, when opportunities arise, there are also challenges. So it creates sometimes confusion for technology and marketers as to how to use the technologies in the right manner. But we are seeing a lot of interesting trends there where people are using, let's say, multimodal Gen AI to design for engaging experiments. They're using the ability of designing with the right synthetic data and the real world data, both internal and external, in the package. So when in the design itself, they have a fair idea of what this requires, and if they have it in their internal data or some external data, or if they can sort of create that in a synthetic manner. So these are very interesting trends. The second, in the data space, marketers are realizing that earlier they wanted to do a lot of their experimentation on a marketing data lake. I mean, get all the data together which is relevant to them. It's very difficult to do that because there is external data, internal data. It's already, the envelope is expanding. So they are looking at 2 or 3 constructs. They are naturally going towards like a data mesh, data fabric architecture. I mean, they may not design for it. The technologies design it for them, but they are embracing that concept, because that gives them very quick access or lightweight access to the data, right? Similarly, a lot of the data ingestion and consumption, it is getting built around very sort of lightweight way of integrating through APIs and all that. So the data mesh fabric API is a very interesting construct. But the last and most important thing is that there is a lot of focus, and GenAI plays a big role there in how to do this. The instrumentation part, there should be observability almost near real time. There should be feedback loops, and there should be a continuous learning around it, right? So how these three things come together, and at the center of all of this, I mean, while we talk of all of this, there is obviously increasing premium to the concept of high veracity data that I can trust, and therefore the outcomes that gets generated out of it are ethical, based on ethical paradigms, and they are explainable at a high level to the stakeholders. So these are the things around the technology space that we see happening in a lot of our client discussions.
Yeah, great. And also from the tech architecture perspective, if you see, there were legacy tools that were available, and then you have the new platforms that are coming up, and also the overall trend wherein the world is moving towards more composable platforms. So Vishal, how do you think about the tech architecture, and what are you seeing as you're speaking with your clients?
Yeah, it's a pertinent question, and it's relevant not just in the context of marketing, but even the broader organization functions. See, if you really look at it, the pace of technological change is extreme, right? At least in the today's world, at least what we see in today's world, right? And businesses have to constantly, post pandemic with the digital transformation push, businesses have to constantly reinvent themselves to be relevant to their customers. Now, this is where, we very strongly believe that, look, investing in a composable platform architecture, think of it this way, rather than building one monolithic, technology architecture, you build kind of Lego blocks where you can plug and play, different platforms, different functionalities to better suit what you're trying to achieve, what functionality do you need and how do you want to change it. I think all of that would then become much easier for you. That will provide the necessary agility you need to move in a fast fashion. It will provide you the flexibility in terms of what functionalities you need, in terms of what you don't need. And this will also enable you to respond to your customers in a much better and faster fashion. So essentially the intent is, see, the technology, if you talk about legacy, earlier people used to say if someone being used for 20-25 years, then it becomes legacy. I say today, if you use it for 2 years, it becomes legacy. So in today's world, right, the technology is becoming legacy so fast. You need to have that composable architecture to plug and play, remove and add components as and when you wish.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's one big takeaway for organizations as they think about building their tech stack. It's an important choice, and I think something that can have a competitive differentiation in terms of your agility and your ability to scale your data programs. Absolutely. So from a talent and skill perspective, Vishal, I think I know there are data scientists and tech guys, and skills have been short, right? I mean, there is always a shortage of such skills. But how do organizations need to think about the talent and skill landscape? What kind of skill sets are important, and how are you seeing that as evolving going forward?
See, again, a very good question. The way I would start is, because technology has permeated, a large part of what businesses do across their horizontal functions or even their BUs, individual business units. Some awareness and some knowledge of key kind of technology imperatives is important. Now, if we talk, let me put things in perspective. See, if we're talking about data-driven experimentations in marketing, right? Let's say the marketing head or his or her team needs to drive experimentation, let's say for customer churn. If the team members don't have a basic working knowledge of the underlying data, where they have collected from, what that data means and how to analyze it, it will become very difficult for them to create a hypothesis and start testing it. On top of it, people say that data doesn't lie. Yes, but data can be biased. If they don't know where the data has come from, whether it is half-baked data, whether the quality of data is right or not, that can lead to, false results. So, some basic form of data literacy, is or technology literacy is absolutely necessary. This leads to my broader point around, from a talent standpoint, I do strongly believe that some kind of a mix of techno functional talent is what is required, especially for driving data centric experimentation. Think of it this way, there can be small sized pods for each initiative that you're running. You don't need to have like a bunch of 50 people doing everything. You have small pods, and each pod, that can be pods can be around 7 to 8 people. They have a mix of technical talent, mix of functional talent, who understand marketing, who understand customers, and then they drive it. In fact, there was this interesting, I don't know if you or some of our audience might have seen this. Jeff Bezos from Amazon, he created this very famous two pizza rule. He said that no team in Amazon will be, it needs to be small enough that if that team goes into a meeting, then two pizzas can feed the entire team. So that essentially gives us, number between, 5 to 6, 5, 7, 8 people, right? And the reason was, to drive initiatives, experimentation, innovation in an agile and a faster fashion. So something similar here, pods with techno-functional talent, kind of becomes important. Number two is purely from a tech skills standpoint or talent skills standpoint, right? I said that, look, some basic form of data literacy is required. On top of it, I think because, the technology has become fairly advanced with the, invention of generative AI, some of the additional skills that will become important: ML engineering and ML ops, because I do strongly believe that a lot of the marketers will be, adopting or enhancing their use of AI going forward. So ML engineering, ML ops becomes important. Prompt engineering, additional relevant skill as you start increasing the use of generative AI in your core work. You need to know what kind of prompts will yield better results, right? And then thirdly is, your statistical and data science techniques, how to draw inferences from the data that you have. So I think these are then becomes essential skills in a lot of ways, as you kind of start looking at driving data driven experimentations. So net just to recap, a mix of techno plus functional talent is the need of the hour, as you look to get greater value or meaning from your data.
Right. Annie, as a practitioner, you're scaling up Factspan fast, right? You're hiring a lot of people, variety of skill sets, very clued on to the talent market. What are you seeing as some of the critical skills, and how you're thinking about hiring, reskilling, upskilling? I would love to hear from you.
Great. See, we as a company, we have always focused on two types of hiring. One is we do a lot of hiring at a base level from MTechs and B schools and all that. And then we have very specific, lateral hiring, specific skills, right? So I'll give you an example of what is changing a lot on built on what Vishal suggested, right? So what we are seeing is when we are hiring B school grads, we need to so they bring in certain skills, they learn certain skills when they do traditional type of work. What is add-on needed for data centric experimentation? Two things come out. One is because they have to now work with marketers, but the marketers have to manage multiple stakeholders, so they need to have very strong understanding of design. Whether some people come with design thinking knowledge, some people come with Six Sigma design, for Six Sigma sort of knowledge. So design is very critical now. Some people bring with them very strong UX design concepts. So design, and the second part of that is once the outcome comes in, they have to now go and explain it. They have to derive decisions from it. So the storytelling part. So these are two very critical skills that we scout for, we coach them, and we train them, and they obviously bring value in the work. On the technical side, as Vishal rightly pointed out, ML engineering, I mean, we are trying to sort of bring people, instead of just traditional Python and SQL and all those sort of stuff, which already is there, we are trying to bring in elements of higher level of ML engineering, ML ops, X ops. People need to understand it very fundamentally, right? Because even as in the technical side of it, there is an importance of the cost optimization. So it doesn't help if I build some experimentation platform on which a lot of experimentation is done, but when I go from 2 experiments per day to 10, the cost equation completely blows away. So that's another skill we are trying to build in the technical guys. In the lateral hires, the architects, we are trying to see that they understand the concept of building stuff in a multi-platform, in a composable architecture. So people need to come with that background, or adapt to it very fast. People who generally come from a cloud architecture background, they have it, but they need to sort of understand the big picture, because today we are talking of clouds. Tomorrow it could become a lot of IoT plus cloud. We don't know how the exact system will evolve, but the principle is very clear. It has to be composite. Similarly, the architects and the senior people, they need to understand the value of agile delivery. Quick, frequent experimentations showing the value. And if you design for it and architect for it, then it really has chances of being much more value creator. So these are broadly the things that we are trying to scout for and train people in.
Right, right, and I think it's an ongoing journey. I think the market will evolve, new tools and technologies will keep coming in, and there's always this constant need to reskill and upskill talent based on what new things are emerging. But I think it's a very, very critical aspect of scaling data-centric marketing and experiments. Let's talk about from the marketing leadership perspective. I think they are supposed to make a lot of decisions, investments. And these are high visibility projects many times. So what are the key aspects of a marketing leader? Key aspects that a marketing leader should consider before engaging in data-centric experimentation. Vishal, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, see, there are many things that come to my mind, but let me kind of focus on these two. Uh, See, the first one is, the importance of data, right? At the end of the day, if you're driving data-driven experimentation, the data becomes, your most critical, asset. And the best practice, or one of the things that our marketing leaders should, keep an eye out for, is tapping into new and better data. Think of it this way, any kind of data-driven experimentation or growth marketing, whatever you want to call it, is only as good as the data behind it. Even new models that are still using all data are still likely to provide, inaccurate results, the new ML models or analytic models. So essentially, to enhance the efficacy of the insights, leaders, need to take a wide angle approach to data collection by not only gathering their in-house data, be it customer data or whatnot, but also looking at third-party data, from, let's say, social media, from other businesses, from their competitors even, to complement their in-house customer data, because that will give them a more broader picture of what is happening and how they need to attune their products, they attune their, their marketing spend, to align with what customers are looking for. Secondly, even within the data part, I'd said this earlier, but I'll just make it very quick now. Sometimes, because of the way that data is collected and from what source it is collected, the data can also itself provide biased results. So the team, the leader, needs to know where the data is coming from. They should have a better handle on, whether they need to further augment that data with either need to clean that data or need to augment with that data, so that you remove the inherent biases. Because if it leads to wrong results, you might end up spending into areas where it's not kind of, recommended. So kind of cleaning the data, which is the better data part, right, is important. So the data kind of is the first overall, I would say, and in this kind of, data driven experimentation, data is kind of the critical most important aspect. The second is from a technology standpoint. And now I know, we've spoken a lot about technology and other things. I think what I would want to suggest to our audience and marketing leaders is, first of all, get comfortable with emerging tech. Our world is moving at a very fast pace. Generative AI is already giving jitters to a lot of marketeers as to, how do I use it, which use cases where I should deploy it and stuff like that. But, become a little bold. uh, at the end of the day, if you don't use some of these emerging technologies that can have a huge impact or can fundamentally disrupt the way you do business, you can be left behind. There can be actually existential threats to your business. So be bold, get comfortable around emerging tech. That's number one. And number two is, uh, just referring to my earlier point, start thinking about how do you kind of invest in technology that learns at scale. So some of the earlier technology or platforms, uh, you know, were restricted to, hey, look, they can work with certain amount of data, or they can work with only, a particular kind of data. But we live in a very uncertain world, right? The new normal requires marketeers to get better at testing, faster at reacting. So a more agile operating model is a key element in this, right? So that is where a technology that can learn at scale, if and the scale is only going to increase going forward, in my opinion. That will kind of become important. So data, how do you look at getting access to new and better data? And secondly, from a technology standpoint, how to become comfortable with emerging tech. And number two, invest in technology that can scale. I think these are the two things that I would want to highlight.
Yeah, and also in today's environment, right? I think there is always that expectation of making the right investments and being more prudent about investments, optimizing your tech stack, making sure that all the stakeholders are looking at it in a more prudent way. So Ani, from your standpoint, what would be some of the ideas or aspects what marketing leaders could think about from a tech investments perspective?
Yeah, and just adding to the excellent points that Vishal mentioned. See, when I talk with, let's say CMOs or CMO minus ones, and also the CTOs and CTOs minus one, this has been always true, but it is even more true now because what has happened is we have seen a lot of investments focused on compressed transformations, fast, getting something done. But now there is a relook at happening every layer of investment that a company does. So everybody agrees that there is a need to do experimentation in a different way, in a scaled manner. But there is a huge push on balance between cost and risk. So what does that mean? Let me give some examples. See, I was talking to a senior person in the marketing function of a client, and they were very excited about using synthetic data and also external data. They were repeatedly talking about that, hey, there is this concept of data exchanges where I can actually get external data to sort of balance the internal data that I already have. It really helps me to experiment using new parameters now. He was also talking of how I think most probably some vendor might have talked to them, and he was using the term that today synthetic data is actually making me access data faster, making me get smarter data. I mean, in fact, synthetic data can be smarter than real data is a term he used, and flexibility. So all good. But then when we started talking deeper and sort of we brought into the context that you have to also not go completely on one direction and be too much dependent on external and synthetic data. The trick is the balance. And when we brought in the cost element of it and the risk element of it, what we saw was that the initial exuberance turned to a realistic expectation. And I think that's very critical. Similarly, risk, again, giving the example of synthetic data, it can be a very powerful construct where you don't want to access some data because it has sensitivity or privacy attached to it, or there's a data sovereignty angle. I want to sort of use a particular data which is generated in a different geography, but I cannot really use it in another country. But I can create a synthetic data set which replicates the form factor of that data. So there are interesting use cases of technology as long as it is tempered by the right balance between cost optimization and risk optimization. To me, that's the critical thing that's happening in business. And on the technical side, there is something happening between balancing between a composable architecture and the open architecture versus a lot of this fit for purpose tools. A lot of times companies end up taking specific tools for specific stuff, and especially in the marketing space, a lot of this sprawl has happened or happens. So there is this need of making it a simple open architecture, and which is composable and scalable. So these are the two things that marketers and technologists are working closely together to bring a balance in, so that their value from the experimentation can be maximized.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. So let's talk about some use cases. I know you work with so many organizations, Annie. So can you share some examples of how organizations have went about data-centric experimentation processes to achieve their business objectives? Maybe a few examples with what the challenge was and how the organization addressed it.
Yeah, I mean, we have multiple examples, but I'll sort of narrow it to one or two. See, I'll try to give two small examples on two very different scenarios. One is an example of uh, a pharmacy slash an e-commerce sort of a platform. The challenge that has happened, the particular client has been doing experimentation, and we have been partnering with them for last few years. But what has changed starting this year, what they are trying to do, and ties up with some of the things we have discussed, they realize that their frequency and velocity of doing experimentation is much slower than most probably their competitors. And the challenge they have is that they are working in an environment where a lot of their initial factors and their initial internal data is most probably not good enough, because the external environment has changed a lot. If you look at the environment at which pharmacists or e-commerce companies are working in North America is so different, right? The user behavior, the patterns, what they will buy, when they will buy, their medical buying habits, etc. A lot of things have changed. So your previous way of doing experimentation doesn't work. And so you may have uh, some way of optimizing that. If a person is doing a search and reaching to my site, or if somebody is casually browsing and finding a product, can I ascertain who is more who is more potentially uh, a buyer of a product, right? But now, whatever algorithm data that I had to do that experimentation earlier doesn't fit. I need to augment a lot of my data with new data, and that's where we help them with some external factors, doing some synthetic data generation for them, which augments their internal data. But the most important part was they wanted to do it at a much higher rate, frequency. But the challenge was that they didn't want the efficiency of the experimentation outcomes to go down, or the ability to explain the outcomes, they didn't want to dilute that. So it was a unique challenge because pressure were from both sides. Again, the hypothesis, the design itself had to be re-looked at. The instrumentation, the way of smartly bringing synthetic data, instrumenting using platforms which were faster, where we could acquire data. We didn't really build a data lake. We basically started, they had a data lake, but we started augmenting a lot of data, accessing a lot of data in near real time. And therefore, the velocity improved, the frequency improved, but the quality of it didn't go down. So that's one way where we are still on the path. They have a long way to go, where they want to really almost their target is to do 5 to 10 times of more faster experimentation than where they were doing 1 year back. They are somewhere midway already there, but we think that we have set the platform and the processes so that that scale up can happen much more smoothly now. Another example I can give is this is also a products e-commerce company, where the challenge they had is basically to design for, they want to understand that what type of products are getting discovered by consumers, right? And again, the environment has changed. So if I want to look at the existing behaviors, whether through search or through browsing, it may or may not apply. So very similar construct, but the client was very different. In this case, the client was focusing more on the luxury segment of users, and their challenge therefore was they didn't have too many or too large segments in a narrow segment. How do I do very well-defined experimentation to make conversions better? So in this case, what we did was they were focused on certain geographies of US. So we started doing a lot of external data analysis and bringing the relevant features into the experimentation that they have to do. And that really helped them in understanding the changing behavior of luxury segment customers better. So this was not a change in velocity of experimentation, but this was a change in targeting the right customers in a better way so that my conversion from one customer can become better and better. And that finally leads them to sort of design better products for the market. So these are two examples. There are a few more, but I just wanted to focus on these two because to me, both of these are close to my heart because this shows that experimentation, the purpose of it and the way of doing it is changing because of external and internal factors. And it's both a factor of design of the experiment or the right hypothesis and the ability to execute in a very lightweight, faster manner. And these two examples sort of brought these two together.
Yeah, thanks, Annie, for sharing those. Very interesting. I know we're almost on top of our time, so we'll wrap this up. But I think we covered a lot of content. If you see in episode 1 and episode 2, a lot of interesting points around the what's of data-centric experimentation, and then more the how-tos and the tech, the talent aspects of it. I think the topic is vast and it's also fast evolving. So not possible to cover everything, but we would love to continue this conversation with all of you. If you're a marketing leader and you're thinking about data-centric experimentation for marketing at scale, or wondering how Gen AI is disrupting the marketing landscape, do feel free to reach out to us. Our experts, Ani, Vishal, others, we would be happy to engage with you one-on-one and address your queries. With that, it's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining in today, and look forward to seeing you again sometime. Thank you.
Thank you.